collapse and comeback. They sold homes that did not exist yet. All across China, families handed over their life savings for an apartment that was still a hole in the ground or a patch of empty field, and trusted that one day it would rise into a tower they could live in. They signed the papers. They paid. And then, for well over 1 million of them, the crane stopped. The workers walked off, and the building simply never came. This is the story of Evergrande. At its peak, it was the largest property developer on the entire planet, building homes for millions and turning its founder into one of the richest men alive. And when it fell as the most indebted company in the world. The number sitting at the center of the wreckage is almost too big to picture. More than $300 billion owed to banks, to investors, to suppliers, and to ordinary families. It started small, and it started in 1996 in the southern Chinese city of Guangzhou. The founder was a man named Hui Ka Yan. He had grown up in real poverty in rural China, worked his way up, and he built his company on one simple, powerful, and dangerous idea: sell the apartment before you build it. In the property world, this is called pre-selling, and on its own it is completely normal. A developer takes deposits from buyers, in China often up to 90% of the full price, for flats that still exist only as drawings, then uses that incoming cash to actually build them. Do it once on one project and it works fine. Do it across hundreds of projects in hundreds of cities at the same time, and you are quietly spending tomorrow's money to plug the holes in today. Evergrande did exactly that on an enormous scale. It plowed the deposits into buying more and more land, and then borrowed heavily on top, from state banks, from international bond investors, and even, remarkably, from its own employees and suppliers. Every new project helped pay off the last one. As long as house prices kept climbing and new buyers kept queuing, the machine never had to stop, and almost nobody asked what would happen if it did. And the money went everywhere. Hui bought a football club, Guangzhou Evergrande, poured a fortune into it, and made it the best team in Asia, winning 2 continental championships in the space of 3 years. He launched a line of electric cars before selling a single one at scale. There was Evergrande bottled water, Evergrande theme parks, even Evergrande pig farming. A property company was mutating into an empire that tried to do a bit of everything. The ambition reached its peak with a football stadium shaped like a giant blooming lotus flower, 100,000 seats, among the largest in the world, with a budget reported at around $1.7 billion. It was meant to stand for a century as a monument to the company's power. Instead, half-built and then abandoned, it would become a monument to something very different. By the late 2010, the picture looked unstoppable. Hui Ka Yan was ranked among the richest people in all of China. Evergrande employed roughly 200,000 people directly, and its projects supported millions more jobs across the construction industry. On paper, it was a triumph. Underneath the paper, the debts were quietly stacking higher and higher, higher than almost anyone outside the company truly understood. Then, in 2020, the ground shifted beneath it. The government in Beijing had grown deeply alarmed at how much debt the country's property developers were carrying, and it drew what it called the 3 red lines, 3 hard limits on how much a developer was allowed to borrow. For the very first time, a company that lived and breathed on borrowed money found that it could no longer simply borrow more. The tap that fed everything was being turned off. For Evergrande, which owed money in every single direction at once, this was the beginning of the end. Its whole model depended on taking out new loans to pay back the old ones. Now the new loans were gone. Through 2021, the company began selling off assets at fire sale prices, delaying payments to its suppliers, and quietly missing deadlines it had always met before. The cracks were turning into fractures. By September of 2021, the crisis was front-page news right around the world. Evergrande's dollar bonds, The IOUs it had sold to international investors were trading at pennies, the price of a company the market expected to die. And the fear went far beyond one firm. Investors everywhere worried that if a giant this big went down, it could drag China's entire property sector, and maybe the wider economy, down with it. In December 2021, the thing everyone had been dreading finally happened. Evergrande formally defaulted, which simply means it could no longer pay what it owed to its international bondholders when the money came due. The largest property developer the world had ever seen had run completely out of road. Then came an image almost nobody had predicted. On a vast man-made island off the tropical coast of Hainan, local authorities ordered 39 of Evergrande's apartment towers to be torn back down, ruling that the permits to build them had been illegally obtained in the first place. Read that again. Buildings that real families had already paid real money for were now scheduled to be demolished rather than ever finished. But the deepest wound was a much quieter one. Spread across the whole country, Evergrande had reportedly taken deposits from around 1.5 million buyers for homes it had not delivered. Many of them had taken out mortgages and were dutifully making monthly payments on apartments that were still nothing but concrete shells or empty air. In protest, some of them did something almost unheard of in China. They simply stopped paying. By the time the accountants had finished counting, the sheer scale was hard to take in. Evergrande's liabilities, everything it owed, reached about 2.4 trillion yuan, comfortably more than $300 billion. Against that mountain stood assets worth far less. In the plainest possible terms, the company owed vastly more than it actually owned. And then came the twist that turned a painful collapse into an outright scandal. China's securities regulator investigated the books and reached a damning conclusion. Evergrande's main operating unit had not merely failed, it had lied. In just the 2 years before it defaulted, the regulator found the company had inflated its reported revenue by around $78 billion. That ranks among the largest financial frauds ever uncovered anywhere. The regulator even laid the fake figures out year by year. Revenue, it said, had been overstated by roughly 214 billion yuan in 2019, and then by about 350 billion yuan in 2020, sales recorded on the books as solid and real that had, in truth, simply never happened at all. The punishment came down hard. Evergrande's flagship unit was fined the equivalent of around $577 million. The founder, Hui Ka Yan, who had been detained by police back in 2023, was personally fined and then banned from China's financial markets for the rest of his life. And even the outside auditor, the global firm PwC, was fined and had part of its China business suspended for signing off on those accounts. On the 29th of January, 2024, a judge in Hong Kong finally ran out of patience. After granting the company 7 separate extensions, and after seeing no workable rescue plan emerge from any of them, she ordered Evergrande to be liquidated, that is, broken apart and sold off for whatever its pieces could still fetch. It is time, she said, to say enough is enough. Trading in Evergrande shares was frozen that very same day, and in August of 2025, the company was formally struck from the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, 16 years after it had first listed there in triumph. The Lotus Stadium still sits unfinished, and the liquidators are now left with a near-impossible job, finding real money for a long line of creditors inside a company whose assets, it turned out, were never quite what they claimed to be. In the end, Evergrande's lesson is a strikingly simple one. A business that stays alive only by selling tomorrow in order to pay for today is not really growing at all. It is borrowing against a future that has to keep on arriving, on schedule forever. The day that future finally failed to show up, the flats, the fortune, and the trust of millions all came crashing down together. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. New collapses and comebacks land 3 times a week.